were often at a loss. Um, Kids were often at a loss for how to write about creatively about themselves in an honest way that allowed them to showcase everything they wanted to say about themselves in the 650 word space they were given. It was intimidating, and it was confusing. And often kids were not comfortable with writing creatively at all, not and particularly not about themselves. So I had approached Ami to see if Ami, who's also a writer, to see if she was noticing the same thing. And we decided to join forces in January of 2020 to start our essay coaching company. And we vowed to try to serve as many kids who need help as possible. So whether or not they can afford to the resources to have someone like us help them through the process, we want to be able. We don't want finances to be a factor, so we try to help as many people as possible. And because we got started in January of 2020, the Zoom became a thing very quickly, and so we have been able to help kids from California to Connecticut to China. We have kids currently in Europe, in New York, all over the U.S., but we mostly work with kids in person in Washington D.C. area. So we're really familiar with how, and we've had kids apply to schools all over the country and the UK and Canada. So we have a lot of experience seeing a lot of different prompts, and particularly we're looking at some of the ones that are new this year that we'll talk to you about. And Ami, I'll hand it over to you. Sorry, that was a long introduction.
No, that was great. Adrienne, I am Ami Foster, the other half of the essay coaches. Similarly, Adrienne and I have similar backgrounds. I also have a background in test prep and college counseling and all of that. So getting to work with students on their essays sort of at this moment in time when they are finding their voice, reflecting on where they've been and where they want to go is, a joy for me. I love getting to do this, and I love even more getting to do it with Adrienne. And I would say, let's see. So I also have two kids who have gone through, one of whom just graduated from college, both APS students. And then my son is a senior this year, so he's going through exactly what your mentees will be going through. So, familiar with the process from all angles, from all the students that we've helped over the years, but also going through it as a parent. And even though it was a while ago, the memories are still sort of sharp of going through the process myself as a student. So, I'm sure a lot of you can connect with the students that way as well. So we'll just dive in here to the presentation, but do feel free. We'll leave time at the end for questions, but if there's something in the moment that you want to ask, just unmute yourself, jump right in. Don't worry about raising a hand or doing anything like that. I think we're a small enough group, but we will definitely have time at the end for questions as well. So I'm going to go ahead and advance this slideshow, and Adrienne, why don't you get us started?
Okay, so I think the first slide that is what do we mean when we say college essays? So for those of you who may be like me, or people who applied to colleges before me, or even like a little bit after, college essays looked really different back in the day when I was applying in the 90s. No one used the Common App. Now the Common App is, I hope you guys are probably getting intimately acquainted with it. But this is the one that has the 650 word, which is like a page and a half or a page and a third. It's a personal statement about the student, and they're given one of 6 prompts. Ami will go over those, or actually one of 7 prompts. The 7th prompt is literally like submit an essay of your choosing. But there are 6 prompts that encourage students to reflect on something that was important, meaningful for them, that they want to share with every school where they apply, where the Common App is accepted. There are a few schools that we tend to see that don't look at the Common App personal statement, and we tend to use those terms interchangeably. Like personal statement and Common App essay are the same thing. The schools that we see most frequently are Virginia Tech does not look at the personal statement. And the UC system does not look at the personal statement. They have their own application. Many of the state schools have their own application systems. But there are also schools like Georgetown doesn't use the Common App, doesn't look at the personal statement. But one of Georgetown's questions is basically the same thing as the personal statement prompt. So that's the one essay that people tend to work on first. That's about them, that will be shared with all of the colleges. The second one that you'll hear about frequently is the supplemental essays. Those are the college specific or the school specific essays that look to find out more information about the applicant. These are often questions about why a student is interested in whatever they're interested in studying, why they think they're a good match for the school. This is like what people call the why us essay, like why do you want to go here? We also tend to see things asking or prompts that ask about extracurricular activities or meaningful experiences that you have outside of school, as well as, particularly this year, questions about a student's identity and lived experience. So those can be just as important and sometimes more important than the personal statement, but they're usually shorter. Some of them are 50-word short answer questions. Some of them are 650-word full essays. Usually they fall in the range between like 100 and 400 words. And you can have anywhere from, usually there are some schools that have none. Virginia Tech has 4, UVA has 1 this year, William and Mary this year has 2, Stanford has 8, Brown has 8. So you're going to see a range depending on the number of schools and which schools you apply to. Some of them have 0. The COVID question, which is also called the community impact question, is this totally optional opportunity. And let me just say that schools will tell you that some of their essays are optional. We always encourage students to share as much information as possible in as many spaces that are available to them as possible. If there are genuinely some truly optional spaces, the COVID essay is one of them. If there's nothing, the COVID essay was introduced in 2020 when students who were applying to school for the following year, it was a space given to the students to talk about what they had done during this disruption that was, basically across the board for everyone. The colleges often discouraged students from talking about things like, how their grades were handled by their school, because the school will address that. Their high school will address that. So the colleges will already know how grades were handled. The current cohort, 8th and 9th grade was their COVID year. So that is not a super important part of a kid's transcript for the colleges are looking more at 10th, 11th, and progress through 12th grade. So while the COVID question can be meaningful, a space to write like a meaningful piece of information about yourself, it's not an essential thing to fill in. The way that we see students use this is if they were if a parent lost a job, or they were studying, they had to do virtual school and they didn't have a secure internet connection or reliable internet connection. If they had to work with their younger siblings who were in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade while they were trying to do their own 8th grade work, it can help give some context to what this person was going through during that time. If they don't have anything one way or the other to say, you can leave it blank. You could also say, like, in the absence of school, I taught myself German or Japanese or something like that. You can talk about something good that you did during that time if you've then continued to learn new languages. But that's really kid dependent, deciding whether or not to use that space. And then the additional information section is the 650-word space that students have to explain anything that they weren't able to address within the rest of the application. Also totally optional. It can include things like, if you had a concussion and you weren't able to read the AP US history book last year and your grades dipped, you might want to explain that. But then you also want to focus the balance of your essay on how did you recover from that. So, I made sure to follow concussion protocol. And I sat with my best friend and had him read me the book. And so he helped me figure things out. And I went to the teacher after school. So it tells, and this is something that comes up a lot. We often talk to students about not just writing about what happened to them, but what they did with what happened to them. So if you focus the balance on, how you got over the thing that was a challenge for you, it always looks better for the school.
All right. So we'll talk a little bit more now about what defines a successful personal statement. It's hard, I think, sometimes for kids, as Adrienne referred to earlier, this is a really different kind of writing than most kids do in school. So it's not that academic formal voice that they're often writing with in school, but it's also not supposed to be a journal or a diary or like the kind of super casual way you might talk to a close friend. Um, so it's something in the middle, it's something that is in the student's voice, but the sort of more, a little bit more formal or trying to be impressive kind of voice, but not overly so. A good personal statement will tell an important story. So it doesn't have to be, that doesn't mean that the topic has to be incredibly significant, the biggest thing you ever did. It could be a small story, but meaningful in how it represents who you are. It should be in the student's voice. So, this is not a place where they need to reach for the thesaurus over and over again. It should be something that they can comfortably read. It should reveal the student's personality, characteristics, values. What we kind of talk to the students a lot about is like, so what, right? At the end of each paragraph, even at the end of a sentence, like what did that sentence do for you? What was the value? What did it reveal? And a lot of, as we tell students, think about the best stories you've read or seen or watched. You often see a character grow or develop over the course of the story. So is there anything that you're showing that you've learned or a way that you've changed over time, or through a realization? And really what this is doing is it's a way for the reader to get a chance to know the student better, right? This is the 5 minutes that the admissions office has with the student to find out something that's outside of the transcript, that's outside of the activities list. And they're just trying to get to know the student. So the voice that should come through is the student, and it should be a way for the school to understand who this kid is better and who they will be in college. So the one thing we see a lot is students who try to reach way too far back. Their most significant story often is in their childhood, but just because that's significant in how they developed over a long period of time, that's not necessarily revealing about who they are today. So one thing that we've seen a lot with students is this tendency to go back to their most important story, but that's something that happened when they were 5 or 6 or 8. So just really encourage the students to think about what has happened in the last year or two, or maybe 3, or if they start the story way in the back, many, many years ago, jump ahead to what does that mean to them now? How do they reflect on that? How did that influence who they are today? Because the schools are trying to get a sense of who the students will be at that particular college or at that university. And here are the prompts. So in case you haven't seen them yet, you can, if you just do a Google search on Common App prompts 2023-24, you'll find this. But you'll see, if you take a moment to read through these, they're very they're good prompts. There's a reason why the Common App has really stuck with these year over year over year. They've only kind of, they've changed out one every couple years maybe. So these are reliable. They do let students into their story in many different ways. And so it's a good idea for you all to familiarize yourselves with the Common App prompts. What we usually do when we're working with the student is before we even really look at the prompts, we talk to the students about what are the most important things about you? What are the characteristics that you value? What are all the different things that you're interested in? And so before we even look at the prompts, we try to have the students pull up to the surface what feels most meaningful to them. And then they might think, okay, my, most sort of important, the most life-shaping thing that I do is this after-school work, this job that I have. So then they can kind of go into looking at the prompts with this idea of like, which one lets me tell about the job in the way that I most want to do it. So sometimes it's better to have that conversation first and then go to the prompts and say, which prompt lets you tell the story you want to tell in the best way? Which one seems like the best way into the story that you want to tell? We find a lot of students like number 5. That seems to be like, Adrienne, would you agree with that? Do you feel like that's the one that your students kind of go to most?
No, you know what? I don't think I've had a lot of those this year, but I do, we do see that one. It's like, so these prompts are sometimes like the reverse of each other. Like an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth is kind of the flip side of the obstacles we encounter can be fundamental for later success. So I feel like I often see like a meaning or like some type of meaningful experience that they had, and then how did that impact them later on, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But also sometimes students will spin that into I think the number 4 prompt, the
The
gift,
gratitude prompt.
the gratitude prompt. I love
Mm-hmm.
that one because you can make anything a gift. You can make like the guitar that your mom gave you a gift, or the like musical ability that your mom gave you a gift. And then what have you done with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And then number 7 is, what Adrienne referred to earlier, share an essay on any topic of your choice. We usually, I would say we generally discourage this one just because so when the students are filling out the Common App, they indicate which prompt they're responding to. So if they're responding to 1 through 6, the reader on the other end knows what they're about to read. They know what they're looking for in the essay. Whereas with 7, they don't really know what they're reading. And so if a student chooses to do number 7, I would say just make sure it's very, very clear. Almost have them write their own prompt that they're responding to so that the essay is not aimless. But I would say the vast majority of students that we work with find something in 1 through 6 that they feel good about and that feels like the right way into their story. Okay.
I agree. And we do a lot of, did we miss one?
Yeah, I think so.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are a lot of ways to get started. And, hopefully your students have already started this essay. If they've worked with us, we've already talked to them about some of this, or if they've had a meeting with us, we've already talked to them about some of this. A lot of this is happening in the classrooms right now. If your kid goes to an APS school, they probably have a teacher who's either, asking them to do it or giving them time to do it. But one of the things that Ami and I really enjoy doing with kids is this first meeting where we get to kind of interview kids and draw out some of the things that they might want to talk about. A lot of kids have a hard time getting started because they feel like it's got to be this monumental, super significant thing that, how could I possibly encapsulate everything that's important about me into this 650 words? It's not going to be that. It's just going to be a little snapshot or a sliver of your life story that can give us a window into wanting to learn more about you. So we like to start by interviewing kids, asking them thoughtful questions about their interests, their family, their favorite things to do, personal mantras, meaningful experiences, difficult moments, wisdom gained, best advice for their younger selves, etc. I have this one question that where we ask, and I get such interesting responses like, when was the first time you felt like a grown-up? And I've had people answer everything from like the first time I made my peanut butter and jelly sandwich and I like packed my own school lunch. That was like the start of me becoming a grown up. I had a girl answer the first time she was allowed to walk to Target by herself, and she came up with a really cute essay about walking to Target and kind of how that inspired her to become more independent and figure out who she was. I had one person tell me that it was the first time that they flew a plane. And I said, the first time you flew in a plane? And they said, no, the first time I flew a plane. And I was like, why didn't you lead with that? That's a great essay. So it's there. Just be creative in the way that you like get to know your student, and then take notes. I will transcribe because it's kind of what I do anyway. Like I'll transcribe as I'm listening to people talk about things, and I look for them to like light up when they get excited when they're talking about something. This can, by the way, fit in if there's something that your student is super interested in, like they like get consumed by this topic, that could be a good like clue that the prompt number 5 might be good for them. I think, was it prompt 5 or 6? 6
Six,
is
I
the one.
think.
It's 6, right?
Yeah.
The one that's like something that you get like that makes you lose all track of time, and who do you go to learn more about it, and how do you find out more about this? So kids who get super into coding or bacteriophages or whatever it is, crossword puzzles, you will have kids who get like very very into something. That might be a good clue that that would be a good prompt for them. You can transcribe what they say and hand it back to them, like, or send them the notes. That those are their words that they can use to start writing an essay, because sometimes kids are better at telling their story than writing their story. And they can have a friend do that for them too. Like, you can suggest that if they're not comfortable enough with you yet to give you all of the good dish, they could, you can suggest, sit down and talk to a friend about something and have them type out what you say, because those are their words. You're not writing the story for them, you're reflecting their story back at them. Or if they're not that type of person, if they really want to keep their stories private for now, or if they just need to like kind of force themselves to start writing, you can put on a song for 5 minutes and just start writing with your pen to paper, and don't, or fingers to keyboard, and don't stop until the song's over. Make it a short song, like a 4 or 5 minute song. But the process of just getting those words out of the way can clear the path for the important things that they have to say. I often say there's no such thing as wasted writing, because students feel this pressure to only put down on paper what is perfect, and that is not the case. Ami likes to say, like, the schools are not going to see your draft. Like, you can write as many drafts as you want, and it's not a waste of your time, because it's helping you get to the thing that feels meaningful for you to say. Or sometimes brilliant writing comes after you've cleared away the stale or obvious thoughts that stand in the way. I have an editor who calls it clearing my throat. Whenever I write too long, she'll like lop off the first couple of sentences. She'll be like, clearing your throat.
All right. So tackling the identity essay. So this often now this year is coming in the form of supplemental essays. This is a bit of a reaction to the Supreme Court ruling this past summer, striking down affirmative action. And so what schools are doing after consultation with lawyers and everybody, they are sort of asking students just directly about their lived experience. So now, they're not going to see the sort of, they're not going to be able to look for diversity through the ethnicity boxes that they used to take into consideration before. But as the wording says in the, I think the legal term is the syllabus that Roberts wrote, at the same time, nothing prohibits the universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected the applicant's life, so long as that discussion is concretely tied to a quality of character or unique ability that the particular applicant can contribute to the university. So, if your students have questions about how or whether they should talk about their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexuality, any of these types of things, I think that anything that's important to them is worth writing about. And I think that for students of, especially underrepresented minorities, talking about their race and in a way that, like, how did it affect their lives, right? Was there something about the culture that they grew up in that really shaped how they view the world? Was there something about their family structure? Was there something about the traditions that they grew up with? Was there something about feeling like an outsider in certain spaces and feeling like an insider in other spaces? So it is, I think, worthwhile to tackle this directly with your students. Definitely a lot of kids at HC are minority students. And so, this is the wording, and this is something that we sort of encourage students to explore if they are asked to do so. And we have noticed that a lot of the supplemental essay prompts have adjusted and adapted this year. A lot of schools were later to put them out than they normally are, because they were being responsive to this, and they want to give the students an opportunity to share how their lived experience might influence how they will be a student at the university. And so, there are a million podcasts and articles and all of these things about this, but I think this is the most relevant piece of information that, it's the concrete tie to a quality of character or unique ability that the applicant can bring, that they would speak to if they're sharing about their racial or ethnic background. Adrienne, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just thinking it's kind of, again, the thing we keep coming back to, like, it's not what you get, it's what you do with what you get.
Yeah.
So like it's in almost any case, you can go a little bit further with that concept.
Mhm.
So we have students who are new to the country, who came here in sixth grade, who've lived here forever, whose families have lived here forever, all of whom, belong to various minorities, and they all have different experiences. So just to say that, like, there's a monolithic experience for people of a certain culture or background or ethnic, like, association identity, it's not accurate. I think there are a lot of ways to reflect on how that makes you resilient, interesting, flexible, empathetic. I think a lot of that stuff can, oh, you can tie your lived experience because of your racial identity, or gender, sexuality identity, into something that is bigger picture, not just a box check. I kind of like the fact that they're giving kids these opportunities to say, as a Black woman who's interested in going into nursing, or a black girl who's going into nursing, I recognize that this is a field that's often been overlooked, in, like, the mortality rate for, or a demographic that's often been overlooked, sorry, and the mortality rate in my demographic is particularly high, and make those connections there. So there are a lot of good opportunities to write about, to include your race, gender, identity, and then say, why that matters and what they've done with what their identity, what their lived experience was. Um, okay, yeah. So encourage your students to take notes on each college that they write about. This is about the reason we have this slide in here is because for the supplemental essay prompts, many of them will ask, why are you a good fit for this school? Why do you want to, why are you choosing this major? Why are you saying that you want to study what you want to study? Or even something like, there are definitely essays that don't directly ask, why are you a good fit, but they might say, like, tell us something about a meaningful contribution that you've made to your community. So if the students take either an in-person tour, or they go to a visit from a college representative who comes to their school, that's happening now and in the next couple of months, or they do their online research, they can, people students will get a sense of, like, they usually get a vibe, like they like the vibe. It feels like people that they know, who, like, they identify with, will go there. But sometimes it's hard to make a concrete connection to what it is that you like about any given school. So the more specific you can get when you are writing your supplemental essay prompts, the better. So you don't want to say that I want to go to this school because it's got beautiful weather, an awesome football team, and it's not too far from my house. Like, those things are totally irrelevant. You can be one of any, dozen or 24 schools, and that would make sense. You want to say that from, like, the minute you set foot on campus, or the interaction that you had with an alumni, or when you were talking to a specific professor about an academic track or research program that was available, you felt like it was something that not only interested you, but allowed you to use the whatever the values are that you want to tell the college about. That makes a stronger connection for the college, both in terms of letting the college know that you're paying attention and why you're applying to this school. You're not just throwing out an application. And the more college thinks that you are personally invested in applying to a school, the more likely they are to offer you admission. This is something you probably have heard of, called, like, demonstrated interest, and that shows up in a lot of different ways. But the Why Us essay is actually one way to ascertain whether or not the kid is really genuinely interested in going there. The other reason that I think it's important to write down notes when they're learning about schools is to help them differentiate between all the different schools that they're going to. And if they don't have a real concrete answer for why they like a school. They can help them narrow down their list and zero in on the specific things that they're looking for in a school so that they can eliminate having to write essays that, for schools that they'll never go to and they're not really interested in. It helps both in both ways, both the student and the person who's reading it. So just encourage them to, like, ask them why and why they like any given school beyond just, it felt cool, it was my vibe, whatever.
All right. So timeline. Um, you know, as Adrienne mentioned by now, most students will hopefully have at least started a personal statement, whether they did that over the summer after our boot camp or just because teachers have given them some class time to do that. That's a good place to start. But as we've talked about, there are often more essays to be written. Certainly if your students are applying through Posse or QuestBridge, that's going to have its own set of essays as well. And if your students are applying early action or early decision anywhere, those deadlines can come soon. Mid-October, early November are common early deadlines. Typical regular deadlines are usually January 1st. So we like to encourage our students to make sure that they're done before the Thanksgiving holidays so they don't sort of wreck their holidays with something that could have been done sooner. And that also buys them a little bit of time if they think, okay, still maybe want to add a school, or I heard about this great place that my friend is excited about and I looked into it and feels like a good fit for me. They still have a little bit of time to add that in if they want to. And one thing that you can do as mentors is help your students. They've got this massive sort of set of assignments in front of them. And this whole college application process is really one of the biggest project management types of tasks that they've probably taken on up to this point. So as mentors, you can sort of help them organize the whole process and say, okay, like what are your deadlines? What do you need to get done? Let's work backwards from like, okay, here are all the tasks you have to do. So maybe you can help them organize their prompts, understand what the word counts are, find the overlaps where, 2 or 3 essays seem really similar. Figure out the order of operations. Maybe there's some school that they know is an absolute reach, kind of a dream school for them that they're unlikely to get into, or they have a lower percentage chance of getting into. Then what they could do maybe is write that one last. So that application, if they really want to, they still can apply, but maybe get all your other stuff done first before you tackle that one. So strategic time management is, another role that I think mentors can really help students both plan for and then be held accountable to, or stay on track of, like, remember you set your deadline to be done with your first draft of your supplemental essays by this date. How are you doing against that deadline that you had lined up? All right.
And when we give feedback to kids, and I always pass this along to parents, and I think it's very valuable for the mentors too. Try to frame your feedback in the positive. There are 3 questions that I bring to every essay. And the part of the reason behind this is because when a student is sharing their essay with you, they're in a vulnerable spot. They're telling you stuff. I mean, they don't know you super well yet. And so they're putting stuff out there for you. And if your first instinct is to criticize, it might, or like maybe you're like looking for the things to correct, that can be off-putting for a student. And if you don't give them the necessary like feedback because you're afraid to say something that might upset them, then you're not helping them. So if you approach it with these 3 questions, what do you like? Read through the essay. When I do it, I read through the essay first. Then I go back and I like highlight the things that I liked about it. Maybe they use an excellent turn of phrase, or they describe something that's really interesting. Maybe they talk about like an experience that like sounds amazing to you, that you like that you think is a great topic for an essay. So first, what do you like? What do I like about the essay? Then what do I have questions about? Like, why did you decide to go sailing in, your friend's bathtub? Like, what is the thing that you were doing here? Can you explain your thought process behind it? And then what do you want to see more of? that can be like, I'd like to hear more of your voice in this essay. Or remember how you used those like that really interesting description where you were able to show me what that felt like rather than just tell me that it was like fun. Do that throughout the rest of the essay because it makes me feel like I really get to know you when you show me stuff like this. And then I am emphatic about making suggestions, not corrections. I use the comments. I have students share everything with me in Google Docs. Most everyone is comfortable with Google Docs. Sometimes there's a school like there's like if your kid goes to Yorktown, I think there's some like challenges sometimes where there's like a snafu where you can't share from your school account, but you guys can get around it somehow. And then I use the comments function to offer suggestions. I don't make corrections. And I never type directly into a student's essay. Like I would feel bad like putting a space in between a word or like correcting a word that's already like, underlined for them. I let them choose what feedback to incorporate and to correct on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Another resource sort of along these same lines, we end up needing to
Oh
teach a
yeah.
lot to the students. So, they might have forgotten comma rules or they might not remember what passive voice is or things like that. So there are a lot of online resources. We particularly like the Purdue Writing Lab. Adrienne, there's another go-to one that I think you've used.
Like Strunk and White. Because I'm
Maybe.
old school. Yeah.
Grammarly has stuff like there's other,
Grammarly.
just
Yeah.
look online for various things, but the Purdue Writing Lab in particular. So sometimes we'll even paste in the specific lesson into the comment of like, oh, this is this type of dangling modifier or comma mistake or whatever. And
Hmm.
here's some more information if you want to learn more. So we really do try to make this a teaching, thing. What we're hoping this does is help the students with their personal statement and their supplemental essays, but also really teach them in the future how to write something they care about, how to go through an editing process for something they care about. And so we're really trying to demonstrate a tool that we're hoping they will carry with them into college and beyond. All right, so this is sort of related, to what Adrienne was just saying. It is absolutely paramount to preserve the student's voice. It is the student that the university wants to hear from. And so it should sound like them. And so, you can point out issues with the student's writing, but it is also very, very important to make sure that their thoughts, their ideas, their words are what are coming through. And, for anything subjective, default to the student's choice. We always have students read their essays out loud, even through the various draft versions, even if all they have is a first paragraph that they're not very happy with. We encourage students to read their essays out loud. I will ask students before, do you prefer to read it all the way through, or do you want to pause if there's something that you notice that you like or don't like? And we can talk about it as you go, but students can hear mistakes that they can't see. And if they're stumbling over it when they're reading it out loud, that's a good indication that they should do something with the wording there, that the wording probably is not quite right. One of the quickest and best editing tools out there to teach the kids is to read their own pieces out loud. All right.
When actually, can we go back for one
Yeah.
second because so for any like the thing about for and I actually think that this is particularly relevant to this group to when we work with AHC
Yeah.
students because it's not our job to make the students sound like the things that we would write. I don't know how many of you guys are editors who have worked with people on their writing before. We don't want to make this like it's gone through the sausage machine and it's coming out like perfectly technically correct. um so I think there's a lot of like just nuance in learning how to work with and give feedback to a student. Ami and I will find that, and I'll speak for myself. Like I find that when I offer suggestions and corrections, I do correct grammar, sentence structure, punctuation, but I explain why. I don't just say put a comma there. Or take the comma away. I say like you can't put a comma there because separating two complete you're not separating two complete sentences or something. Like I'll give them the explanation, and then we'll point them to Purdue Writing Lab or Grammarly or whatever helps them remember it. But when you're getting a kid when you're working with a kid um, who might be reaching for a vocabulary word that they think sounds a certain way but has a negative, like a positive way, but it has actually has a negative connotation. I might point out to them that that thing sounds like a negative connotation to me, like, and I don't think that's what you mean. I think that you were excited. Like, what's another word that you can use? People tend to default to the thesaurus, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I like to brainstorm with them and have them come up with their own word. Sometimes I'll suggest words and have them pick one, but I don't want to do that with somebody who just will just write down the first thing I say.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit of like developing the rapport with the student to know how much you can suggest and advise, so that you are giving them direction but not doing it for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And Adrienne, I'm just going to go back real quick to make sure we didn't skip a slide
we didn't. We didn't.
earlier. Didn't? Okay.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, but go ahead. You go ahead and do the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what, the students, if you think about where they are right now, they are stressed. They feel the pressure. They, have a lot on their plate. They're also trying to enjoy senior year and still dealing with all the like teenage angst and drama that, just comes with being 17, going on 18. So one of the things that we can do as mentors is just help them step back a little bit and have some perspective. And just remind them that, it's rare for them to have this moment to pause and to be asked about, who they've been, who they want to become, what were those pivotal life experiences that shaped them. So, there's a degree of this that should feel joyful and exploratory and reflective. And so, I think sometimes reminding kids of that, can be helpful, and that can be a role that we can play as mentors. So, being the cheerleader, taking a moment to highlight for the student all the great things, being impressed for them when sometimes they forget to be impressed by themselves. Talking about their accomplishments and, the experiences that they've gathered along the way, that's an important role that we can serve to kind of just reflect back to them what incredible students they are. So, celebrate the story, celebrate the writer. I think you all will be appreciative of the gift that the students are giving you, that they're sharing their stories with you. So that is that.
And I think it even goes just beyond like celebrating the student, but like I really like to be the person, the adult in these kids' lives, who, as Ami was saying, points out all of the impressive things that they've done that they may not even be acknowledging, and also showing them that like sometimes kids get really hooked on a first choice college. Sometimes they don't really know where they're going, but they're all putting in hard work to put, I mean, these essays are like a full-time job on top of, or sorry, these applications are like a full-time job on top of school and whatever job you have or extracurriculars that you have after school. So celebrating the accomplishment of like getting an application in. And then we actually talk a lot about percentage acceptance rates with students, because we don't want college, I mean, we don't want students to feel like the college's decision is a referendum on their value as a person, because there are some schools that have a 5% acceptance rate, and that's basically like buying a lottery ticket. This is not about whether or not you would be a perfect candidate, because maybe you would be, but the college just has way too many people who are well qualified to go there. It's just like, buying a lottery ticket. So don't take it personally if you don't end up getting into that school. And you should feel proud of I always like to celebrate the turning in of the applications more so than the getting back of the announcement of whether or not you've made it in or you're on wait list, which we see a ton of these years, the last couple of years. So yeah. Okay. So some of the bonus tips that we put together for you is to help your mentee create a spreadsheet to keep track of prompts, word limits, and deadlines. We have one that we share freely with students and with anyone else who wants it. If you or your student wants it, let us know and we'll share it with you. It's basically a way to separate out. It's like a Google sheet, that separates out all the essays for each school, what the prompts are, what the word count is, and then what topic the person who's writing whose spreadsheet it is. I mean, linked it in the chat.
I didn't link it. I just put our email address.
Oh, email.
'Cause
Okay. So
yeah.
yeah, email us and let us know if you want it. And what we tell students to do is to copy our format and then take as many schools, copy as many of the school prompts as they'd like from our current master list, but always double check that. Like, we don't want to be responsible for them like missing an essay because they forgot to copy something. They should always check against the Common App. Will have all of the current essays. The school website usually has the essays, but sometimes they forget to tell you that, oh, by the way, you're going to find this essay in the Common App prompt. So it is helpful when it comes to, if you see that you have 40 essays, that's not uncommon, but the likelihood is that 20 of them will be able to be used in like one other essay at least. So maybe you can have the number of essays you have to write. Maybe you can even like get 10 really good essays and repurpose them in 40 spots.
Um, so those school specific essays, the supplemental essays, YS essays, all of those, a good just sort of general formula for those, if you want to help your students and you want something that's kind of easy, is that they should be a combination of what appeals to you at that school, inside the classroom and outside the classroom, and then a combination of things that are about you and things that are about the school. So the student doesn't need to just like regurgitate the website back to the school. Like, they already know that about themselves. But if it's a school that really values service and the student also really values service, then they are a match with the school, right? They're saying, I see that that's your value, that's my value too, and that's why I want to go there. So you're, the sort of combination of a YS essay roughly can be sort of boiled down to in the classroom, out of the classroom, me and the school.
Um, I feel like this is your line, Ami, to say it.
I do like to say this one. Just remind the students when they start getting kind of insecure about this process, they are the world's foremost expert on the topic. The topic is themselves. Nobody can tell the story better than they can. So we can help them tell, we can ask good questions, we can help elicit the details that they might be reluctant to share, or they might not think are important, but they're the ones that have all the information. So just keep reminding the students that they are the expert. They are writing about themselves. This is not about Shakespeare. This is not about the history of, oil in the Middle East or anything like that. This is just about them. And that's what, the reader wants to know about.
And as we were talking about before, sometimes the hardest part is just getting started. And one of the questions we like to ask, you can set a timer for 5 minutes and then ask them to complete the thought. If you really knew me, you'd know what? And that can kind of get a student's juices flowing. So, or the creative juices flowing. But any of the like, I bet you guys could probably come up with some good ideas too. Like, what's a question that you use to get somebody to reveal something interesting about themselves?
And that's the fun part of being a mentor, honestly. It's or one of the many fun parts, but just getting to know the students better, like Adrienne said before, getting that moment when they sort of like light up or get excited to talk about something, it's a fun experience. And then, finally, it is helpful to sort of remind the students that they will be able to repurpose some of this writing in January, February, March when they start applying for scholarships. And so, they should keep track, they should keep all of these things organized. They should sort of keep in mind where their different stories are, because they can come back to this. They don't have to start all over from scratch when they're applying for scholarships. If they've done a nice job with these essays, they can go back and reuse them or reuse parts of them. So that is our presentation. I'm going to stop the share right now, and we are happy to open up to questions.
And we can answer like general questions or specific about your kids. Yeah, Celia, can you want to unmute?
Hi, thank you so
Hi.
much for all this great information. This is amazing. I wish I had talked to you guys before I sent two kids to college. But anyway, quick question. Well, two questions. First, how many schools are kids these days applying to? Like, what's a reasonable amount of schools to help
Can
these
I, can I
kids?
answer that one real quickly?
Yeah.
I say 8 to 12 schools is about the normal range. But what we say, but you can apply to more, you can apply to fewer, but we like to say 8 to 12 schools with a range of acceptance rates. So there needs to be a little bit of calculus on the student's part in terms of figuring out what their chances of acceptance are at any given school. If there's a school that has a less than 20% acceptance rate, that's a very competitive school. um, they should have a couple of schools on their list that might have a 70-80% acceptance rate. But I also say 8 to 12 schools that you would be excited to go to. I never use the words reach or safety because nobody wants to go to their safety school. Everyone feels like bad that they have to go to their safety school. But there might be a school that they're super excited about that has a 70% acceptance rate. That seems like a good school to apply to. Like they would have a good time if they went there, and they tend to accept more people. Or if you are academically competitive, you might fit in that. Or, the other thing is that you could apply to a school where you tend to elevate the academic profile, and they might give you a ton of merit aid in addition to whatever financial aid they might be able to offer you. So you can apply to fewer than that. We have students who are applying only to the to like 5 state schools, but that's what the Virginia state schools are for. They're here to serve the kids who are going through the public school system. And as long as you have a range of schools within like if you'd be excited to go to CNU or University of Mary Washington. I mean, and CNU might change their acceptance rate because it's becoming more popular. It's a school that kids love, and they're probably getting more applications. But I was looking at, I think University of Mary Washington had a note on their homepage over the summer, and I believe that this was true, that they said that they were still accepting applications, which leads me to believe that if you are driven, you can probably get in there. And so if you want to include that in your range of options and you only apply to 5 schools, that's fine. What was your other question?
Okay, great. Thank you. The other question is, you've mentioned a couple of times that you guys are already working with students. How can we find out if you're working with the students we're working with? Because I wouldn't want to like duplicate your efforts or,
Well,
anything like that.
so for the over the summer, we worked with Brenda and did the college essay, or the college and career readiness boot camp. So we actually, it was a day that there was like terrible rainstorms, so that there were like a third of the kids couldn't make it. But
Mm.
everyone who was there got to hear our whole tips on how to write an essay and how to figure out what your story is. And then we offered to anyone that they would be welcome to come to us for more assistance with whatever they were working on. I think 2 people have followed up on that. The offer is open to anyone. We also have office hours that we'll do in October for any student who wants to come in, but it's only like 15 minutes at a time. So you can ask your student if they're working with us, and they can ask you. So they may say that they don't need your essay, they don't need your help with their essays because we're working on it with them, and you can help them with their activities list, with their their student their self-reported academic record, all the other stuff. And the other thing is, we can also work with any mentors who need help. If you have a question, we've definitely fielded questions before from people who are like, my kid doesn't speak English as a first language, and I'm not sure how much to correct and how much I want to preserve their voice, but I also want to let them know, whatever. So we're happy to help you. It's all very subjective. So we're happy to help you help them, and we're happy to help them directly if it makes your life easier.
Yeah. And
Thank
I
you.
think it oftentimes with students we help, they're getting, a second check from us, but they're still getting help from their mentor. So it's not unusual that they might be like, kind of getting a more regular type of feedback from you, but then checking in with us about something specific.
I do have a little, like, I'm not a fan of the too many cooks thing. Like, if they're getting good,
Yeah.
solid help from you, they probably don't need us too. But if they want like a review, we are happy to review something and give feedback. As a matter of fact, that's what Ami and I do when we work with private clients. I will work directly with a client and with a student and get them to the point where I've heard their story. We've like manipulated all the different things that they want to say into the 650 words. And then I'll send it to Ami, who has never seen or met this kid before, and she'll read it and say, okay, this stands out to me as, something that's confusing or whatever. And she'll give a little bit of feedback to help the student figure out how their essay might be read by someone who doesn't know them at all.
Okay, great. Thank you guys.
Yeah, of course.
And just so everyone knows, I put one other resource in the chat, which is kind of an aggregate. It's College Essay Advisors supplemental essay guide. So they do a good job of keeping up to date. And it's like a one-stop shop if you just want to see what the supplemental essays are for different schools. To give you a sense of the range, this is not exhaustive. So if a school isn't on there, that doesn't mean 100% that they don't have supplemental essays. The student should still double check with the Common App, but this is a nice resource for you if you just want to quickly run through and say, okay, what are the supplemental essays for UVA, for JMU, for Virginia Tech, or whatever schools you're kind of commonly seeing. This is a nice one-stop shop for that, where you don't have to go digging through a bunch of different school websites.
And JMU doesn't have a supplemental essay, but they have an honors program essay that you would have to find directly on their website.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll get to know all of this stuff as you work with the students. Like you start to
honors colleges. That's actually good. So that's one other essay that a student might have to
yeah.
if they are applying to JMU or VCU or Penn State, Pitt. Sometimes students choose to apply to the honors college, and that often requires an additional essay. Sometimes that implies an earlier deadline that the student needs to get their application in by. So if a student mentions honors college to you, or if you see that you have a student who's like really strong, high GPA, high test scores, and they're applying to maybe a bigger state school, and you find that there's an honors college there, you might want to encourage the student to try, because often those honors colleges will have additional resources, mentorship. Students have first choice in classes. Like there are some perks that kind of like make big colleges small. For students.
Merit aid too. You can get some good merit aid. South Carolina, I'm now learning all about this because my son is at South Carolina, and University of South Carolina has great honors colleges and merit aid for students, and they've got a couple of tiers, I think. So that's a school that's, by the way, we're seeing a lot of kids wanting to go to like the big state schools in the South this year and last year.
Erin, I think, did you have a hand up?
I did. I did have a question. I'm going to stay off camera if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries.
So I edit and write as part of my job, and I have to do a lot of approval from professional writers very quickly. I just wanted to precurse that with this next bit. I recently had to institute a policy of hit the read it aloud option, because you read it right to yourself because you know what you were trying to say. And if you hear it in a different voice, read it back to you, you hear it as it is actually written. I wanted to get your thoughts on doing that with the kids on essays like this, because my concern is I don't want them to lean on that as a crutch for other schoolwork where they're not going to have that button. But these are professional writers, and it helps them a lot.
Wait, hold up a second. Do you mean that there's a button that you can press that gets the thing to read it to you, read it out loud to you?
Yes, in Microsoft Word. Yeah.
Yeah. And Google has that too.
Yeah.
I think that's a great tool. I mean,
my typewriter doesn't have that.
A lot of, I definitely know some students that are already in the habit of doing that, but I think it's a great tool to teach them, honestly. Like, just because they can't use it all the time, like they can always default back to reading it out loud themselves, but it is a good way, a good habit for them to get into. And so, if that's a tool that you want to share with students, absolutely. And I do think, so if everyone got that, there's like, I think in both Microsoft Word and Google Docs, there's ways to have the interface read out loud the piece of writing. And so, Erin was saying that's another good way for students to.
Does it sound weird?
It does. It's a computer voice, and to get to it, you just right click.
I'm totally doing that after we get off.
It makes a huge difference, because I edit my own stuff sometimes and have to send it out in real time. And I've written for years professionally. You hear it correctly in your own head. If a different voice reads it back to you, I found it very helpful, but I didn't want it to be harmful for the students in their other work in any way.
You mean like so that they don't use it as a crutch, instead they use it as a learning tool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just wanted to get some thought on that and feedback, because we just implemented that because
I feel like we could do a whole other hour on crutches versus learning tools and AI and all of this kind of stuff, but we're probably not going to have time to get to all of that today. But I do think that like the using the transcription is just, especially for students who are where English is a second language, I think that's a gift to them. I think that's a great technique, and it will help them be better writers and better listeners and better editors and everything. So I don't see anything wrong with doing that. Any other questions? Well, I think that's pretty good. 7:33. Laura, what do you think?
This was fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate y'all taking the time to present to us. Thanks to everybody who took the time to come. And as Ame and Adrienne said, they are available in the future if you need them. So Brenda and I would be able to put you in touch.
Yeah, you can. There are our email addresses in there also if you need it. And like really just reach out to us if you have like a specific question. We're happy to answer that stuff. But it's just amazing that what like the relationships you're creating with kids at this pivotal time in their lives is really meaningful, and not just to them, to you too. Like it's.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
hope you guys enjoy your experience this year.
Yeah, Adrienne and I really like have loved keeping in touch with some of our mentees over the years, and it is so just a wonderful program. So enjoy.
Yeah, you guys do an excellent job, AHC.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ami and
Good night.
Adrienne. Thank you all for
Good
being here
night.
tonight. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for setting it up, Laura and Brenda.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And you like complimented all the mentors on our behalf. So that was awesome. Thank you. Have a good
Bye,
night.
guys.
Hey, Adrienne.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.